Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-bum. Hi everyone, it's Rabbi Kenneth Hahn for Ask the Rabbi Thursdays, and today I'm asking the question, who are the most influential Jews in history? And why am I asking that question? Well, a dear friend of mine was cleaning out her aunt's apartment not very long ago, and her aunt had amassed a pretty huge collection of books on Jewish topics, Jewish-themed novels, Judaica, Jewish liturgical books, all kinds of things. And she asked me if I might be interested in some or all those books, and I said, sure, I'll take a look. And among them was this book right here, The Jewish 100 by Michael Shapiro. And it is a ranking by Michael Shapiro of the most influential Jews of all time. So I thought, well, that's an interesting question. I was really curious to see who he had on his list and what the order was. So he had lots of different people that you've heard of, mostly various folks, and some that didn't make the top 10 are people like Gustav Mahler, Moses Maimonides, Niels Bohr, Benjamin Disraeli, George Gershwin, Sandy Koufax even, and the inimitable Groucho Marx. But I was really curious, of course, and who was at or near the top of the list. And so I'll tell you in reverse order, the top 5 included, actually I'll do the top 10. So in reverse order from 10 to 1, Baruch de Spinoza, the Virgin Mary, Theodore Herzl, Karl Marx, Saul of Tarsus, also known as St. Paul, Abraham, Sigmund Freud, Albert Einstein, Jesus, and at the top of the list in his reckoning was Moses. So the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to say a little bit about my reaction to this and who I think belongs at the top of the list and why. I noted he doesn't really define what influence or influential means for him, other than to say that it's people who most change the way we live and think. And I actually don't think that's a bad definition. Dictionary.com has a slightly different one, which is basically influences the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself. So they're not so different. We're talking about impact here, and who has had the most impact, and how, and why, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to note something I found interesting, which is the people at the top of the list are very interesting folks, and there are some real similarities here with the people who are at or near the top. Moses is an interesting choice as the number 1 because, of course, Moses is part of the patriarchal line, if you will, of Judaism, where we don't have any proof of any real kind that these people ever existed. And, there is some historical argument that Moses and the patriarchs and matriarchs prior to him, and now I'm thinking of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel, there's no conclusive proof that these people ever existed. So it's interesting, if we remove the Moses figure from the list, Jesus becomes the number 1 most influential Jew of all time in this person's reckoning. And it's very interesting. Einstein is next, and I find Einstein a very fascinating character, and what I noted is a number of people in the top 10 are people whose ideas became the real impact of their lives. And I don't know if you've been watching the show on National Geographic called Genius, which is about the life of Albert Einstein, but it describes his thought experiments. And the one he's most identified with is his thought experiment where he imagined himself traveling on a beam of light, and that's actually how he helped to imagine the thinking that led to his development of the theory of special relativity. And in fact, it represents that he had another type of thought experiment in an elevator, which helped him establish the theory of general relativity. And Saul of Tarsus and Moses are both noted for having revelation. Moses, of course, had the burning bush, and Saul of Tarsus, or St. Paul, was on the road to Damascus when he thought he saw a vision of God, and that vision convinced him that Jesus was, in fact, the Jewish Messiah, and one thing led to another, and off he went. So I'm clear that most of these people who had ideas that were counter to mainstream thinking at the time, whether it was Karl Marx or Sigmund Freud or Albert Einstein or Jesus or Moses. And they fervently believed in their ideas and were willing to espouse their ideas even in the face of great personal risk at times, and beyond physical risk, potential humiliation and whatnot from the mainstream arbiters of ideas in their time. So they had great courage. So I was thinking, what was the most radical idea among these? And I don't think it's an easy one to identify. I will say this: Abraham, who we don't even know existed, landed at number 5 on this person's list. I actually think, there's a midrash about Abraham that many people know, where as a young man, or even a boy, he was in the studio of his father Terah, who was an idol maker, and his father left one day, and Abraham, whose name was Avram at the time, in a variety of contexts that aren't worth going into in terms of the whole story, the whole midrash, ends up smashing idols and putting the rod with which the idols were smashed in the hands of the largest idol, which remained unsmashed. And when his father came home, his father said, "What's happened here?" And Abraham said, "Well, the largest idol smashed the other idols." And his father, of course, says that's impossible, at which point Abraham says, "Well, how can you worship an idol that you in fact made if you don't even think it has the power to do this?" And the midrash or the story continues. But that is a thought experiment in a very real sense. If everyone believes in idol worship, for example, and you all of a sudden say, "No, that's not right. That's impossible, and here's why." Yeah, even if people don't initially believe you, you hold firm to your belief, and all of a sudden you have established the notion of one God, which of course is central to Judaism, but it's also central to Christianity and Islam as well. So we don't know if the Abraham figure existed, but if there was indeed an Abraham, let alone Abraham himself, at that particular moment in time when there was this crystallization of imagination, that in fact the God concept was a concept of oneness and unity, not this pantheistic notion. That was a pretty fundamental development, and a lot has happened as a result of that, needless to say. And we might even say that Jesus, who is the number 2 person on Michael Shapiro's list, only was able to espouse his ideas in the context of there already having been established this notion of the one God, the oneness. And whether you believe in God as a personal God or whatever your belief is about God, if you have any sense of the unity of all things, and that resonates with a God concept for you, it's fascinating to think that there may have been a moment in time when one person did a thought experiment and recognized that that was, at least in his view, or her view, the true nature of reality. So that's my thought on things. There is one other way of looking at things, which this question of influence, which also comes from a Jewish source, and it's from the Talmud, and it's in the Babylonian Talmud. It's Sanhedrin 37a, and this is that notion. So stated, it goes: whoever destroys a soul, it is considered as if he destroyed an entire world. And whoever saves a life, it is considered as if he saved an entire world. So who truly is the most influential? Someone who espoused an idea and had the courage to maintain his or her beliefs about the idea, even today, and influence the thinking of a great many, arguably millions, if not billions of people, or the person who that we've never heard of down the street, across town, who did something that saved a life, whether it was actually running into a burning building or offering a hug when someone really needed a hug, or spoke a word that needed to be spoken in a particular moment, or alternatively lent an ear when someone else really needed to be heard, or a shoulder when a shoulder was needed to cry on. So I'd be really curious to hear who you think is the most influential Jew of all time. And if you care to weigh in, please do so by writing a comment. And if you enjoyed this, please share it with friends on Facebook, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Monday for Music Mondays. Have a great weekend and a great Shabbat. Lehitraot. See ya.